On Mother's Day, my daughter gave her mother-in-law a $20,000 ring and a cruise. I got a $5 plastic flower and a note. The next day, she called me 28 times. Please, Mom, don't sell the company. I'm truly glad you're here. Stick with my story to the end, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm 67 now, and I honestly believed I had already faced every kind of heartache life could deliver, but I was wrong. That Mother's Day morning started off like most Sundays do. I made a cup of coffee just for myself, sat in the stillness of my home, and tried not to dwell on the absence that had grown heavier since Harold died 3 years ago. At first, the quiet brought comfort. Now it just reminds me of everything that's been lost. The night before, my daughter Oilia gave me a quick call. Her voice was clipped and formal. "Mom, brunch is at David's mom's house tomorrow. Be there at 1. Be there. Not, we'd love to see you, or please come, just a command wrapped in manners. I arrived exactly at 1. The driveway was packed with shiny luxury cars, and laughter drifted through the air from the backyard. Patricia, David's mother, had always been the polished type, elegant, graceful, the kind of woman who made everything look effortless. Her home was a glossy magazine come to life, all white surfaces and artfully arranged flowers. As I stepped into the yard, I spotted everyone gathered around the patio table. Oilia was seated close to Patricia, whispering and laughing like they'd known each other forever. David flipped burgers at the grill, playing the perfect son Patricia had raised him to be. "Colleen," Patricia called out, her smile as graceful as ever. "So glad you could join us." Oilia barely looked up. "Hi, Mom. You can sit over there," she said, pointing to the seat farthest from the conversation. So I sat alone and watched as the group chatted easily, all clearly part of the same social circle. Except for me. David's sister was there, her kids running around the yard, friends from Patricia's bridge club. Even a couple of neighbors had made it. I was just present. Then came the gift presentation. "Oh, Patricia, we have a surprise for you," Oilia said, her face lighting up. David stood beside her, holding a small velvet box and an envelope. Patricia gasped when she opened the box. Inside was a sparkling diamond ring, the kind you see in jewelry commercials. "Oilia, this is too generous," Patricia said, visibly moved. "You deserve it," Oilia said, embracing her. "You raised the most wonderful man I've ever known." Then she added, "And there's more!" The envelope held cruise tickets, 2 full weeks in the Mediterranean, first class all the way. Patricia began crying, and the whole table applauded. Oilia looked proud. Then David cleared his throat. "And now, for Grandma Colleen." Oilia came over holding a small paper gift bag. Inside was a cheap plastic flower, the kind you'd find at a clearance bin, and a card that looked like an afterthought. The card said, "Happy Mother's Day," and beneath that, in Oilia's handwriting, "Thanks for everything, Mom." That was it, like a stranger thanking me for holding the door. The table went silent. I could feel their eyes on me. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. David looked down. "It's lovely," I said, barely audible. "Thank you, dear." But Oilia had already turned away, chatting again with Patricia, excitedly talking about cruise stops and beach towns. I sat there in silence, gripping the flower, feeling smaller than I'd felt in decades. I stayed another hour, just watching. My daughter, showering someone else with love and admiration, and barely noticing me. When I finally said I needed to leave, Oilia barely looked up. "Thanks for coming, Mom. Drive safe." The drive home was a blur. I kept thinking about that ring, those cruise tickets, the pure joy on Oilia's face when she gave them. When was the last time she had looked at me with that kind of warmth? When had she last put real thought into something she gave me? I parked in front of my house and just sat there, staring at the cheap plastic flower on the passenger seat. 43 years of being her mother, and this. This was what I amounted to. A last-minute trinket, likely picked up at a discount bin. That night, I tossed and turned. I couldn't stop the memories from rushing in. Not of the brunch, but of all the years leading up to it. I kept wondering where I had failed. I had started a company from scratch, given jobs to dozens of people, poured into my community. But somehow, I'd fallen short at the one thing that truly mattered: being a mother worth cherishing. In the quiet darkness, I wandered into my office. That's where I kept the documents that told the story of my life's efforts: tax files, contracts, investment summaries, everything I'd built over the decades. And suddenly, a question crept into my mind. What was it all for? That one restless night became many. I couldn't get that scene out of my head. The flower, the look on Oilia's face as she wrapped her arms around Patricia like she was her true mother. I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't need a teary scene or dramatic accusations. I needed the truth. A clear-eyed look at what I had really done for my daughter. So the next Saturday, I began digging through my oldest filing cabinets, the ones I hadn't opened in years. Harold used to joke that I was a hoarder of paperwork. "One day, you'll build a castle out of receipts," he'd laugh. But I always replied, "You never know when you might need proof." I never imagined I'd be gathering evidence of my own motherhood. The first folder was labeled Oilia College. Inside, I found every tuition bill, dorm fee, textbook receipt, and even notes from when I paid her parking fines. $47,000 in total. That didn't include the car I bought her in her junior year when her old one broke down. Next, I opened the folder titled Wedding O&D. The numbers hit me like a wave. $58,000 spent on her wedding. The venue, the flowers, the food, her gown, the photographer. I paid for all of it, proudly. I wanted her to have the kind of day she'd dreamt of. David's parents? They brought a box of wine. Then came the documents related to their house. When they got married, they aimed high. They wanted a home in the upscale Riverside neighborhood, but their income didn't cover the mortgage. I co-signed, thinking it was just temporary. And when David's company hit financial trouble 2 years later, I secretly took over their mortgage for half a year. They never knew. I made sure of that. I found notes on 3 separate cars I helped them get. Each time, it was just a little help until we recover. But the repayments never came. I never pushed. I simply adjusted my own finances to absorb it. Then came the one that really made my breath catch: the emergency fund. Back in 2019, David's landscaping business nearly collapsed. Bad deals, untrustworthy partners. Bankruptcy was looming. Oilia had called me, sobbing into the phone, asking for help. I wired $85,000 that very same day. No paperwork, no agreement. Just a mother trying to hold her child's life together. 6 months later, they bought a boat. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the calculator. 15 years. Over that time, I had poured close to $400,000 into their lives: education, wedding, housing, transportation, business rescues, not even counting the little things. $400,000. And yesterday, I got a plastic flower. But it wasn't the money that hurt the most. I was financially stable. I had made smart choices, grown a thriving consulting firm. I didn't mind giving. What hurt, deeply, was realizing that my giving had become invisible. It wasn't appreciated. It was expected. I picked up my phone and opened our messages from the past year. Her messages were brief, functional. "Can you pick up the dry cleaning? David needs to borrow your truck. The kids need school supplies." Always asking, never offering. Never a random, "How are you, Mom?" or "Thinking of you." But Patricia got cruise tickets and diamond rings. Something inside me finally snapped. I opened my laptop and checked the mortgage details for the house where Oilia and David lived. Of course, the deed still had my name on it. Years ago, I'd set the payments to auto-withdraw from my business account so I wouldn't have to think about it anymore. Out of sight, out of mind. Until now. I pulled up recent statements from that same business account. Line by line, I reviewed each transaction. David's lawn care company maintained 3 of my commercial properties, and I had been paying him 30% above the standard rate. Quietly, without fanfare. Oilia's part-time bookkeeping role? 6 hours a month at most. And I was paying her $2,200 just to help her feel independent. Looking at it plainly, they weren't just family. They were financially dependent on me in every way. 2 grown adults, deep into their 30s, living a life of comfort entirely propped up by my hard work. Yet somehow, I had become the cold one. The disconnected mother. The unrelatable figure in their version of events. They painted me as distant, while enjoying every bit of the comfort I'd provided. I shut the laptop and looked around my office. The walls were lined with framed photos, award ceremonies, speaking events, newspaper articles about Hartwell Consulting, years of milestones. But one thing stood out. There hadn't been a recent photo of me with Oilia in years. She stopped taking pictures with me long ago. The clock read 4:30 p.m. I had been sorting through records for 8 straight hours, and the conclusion was glaringly obvious. I had tried, for years, to earn my daughter's love with support, gifts, and unconditional help. All I'd done was teach her that I was a reliable bank account with a heartbeat. My phone buzzed again, a text from Oilia. "Mom, David's truck broke down. Can we borrow yours for a few days?" I stared at the screen in silence, then typed, "I'll think about it." It was the first time in over a decade I hadn't immediately responded with, "Of course." That evening, I made a choice that would change everything. The next morning, I called my attorney. By Monday, I was sitting across from Margaret Chen, the same lawyer who had handled my affairs for more than 12 years. Her office had a sweeping view of downtown. From her window, I could see the very building I'd built my company inside, a concrete symbol of everything I'd sacrificed and achieved. "Colleen, you look tired," Margaret said, pouring tea as she sat down. "What's going on?" I had rehearsed this in my mind countless times over the weekend, but now that I was here, the words stuck in my throat. "I want to discuss selling my company," I said finally. Margaret blinked. "Hartwell Consulting? But Colleen, that's your legacy. You built that business from the ground up." "That's the point," I said softly. "I need to understand what happens if I walk away, especially how it'll affect my family." She straightened, realizing I was serious. The casual atmosphere evaporated as she pulled out a legal pad. "Walk me through it," she said, pen poised. Over the next hour, I laid it all out. The mortgage payments they didn't know I was making, the business contracts I had awarded to David, the ghost job I'd given Oilia, the endless stream of support that had made them so financially comfortable. Margaret listened carefully, asking a few short questions but never reacting too much. Finally, she looked up. "So, if you were to sell the business, David would lose his best-paying clients. Oilia would no longer have her bookkeeping income, and they'd need to qualify for their home loan on their own." "Exactly." She leaned back slowly. "Colleen, can I ask, what triggered all this? Last we spoke, you were planning to bring Oilia in as a partner." I told her everything. The cheap plastic flower, the diamond ring for Patricia, the feeling of being nothing more than a walking wallet. Margaret didn't interrupt. I saw her wince once or twice as I spoke, but she stayed quiet until I finished. "I see," she said quietly. "And you're thinking of selling as a way to find out who my daughter really is?" I said, "Right now, I don't know if she loves me or my checkbook." Margaret nodded slowly. "There are ways to do this gradually. We could restructure your business arrangements. Maybe transition some of the financial support over time." "No," I said firmly. "Gradual change gives people time to adjust, to find new ways to manipulate the situation. If I'm going to do this, it needs to be clean." We spent another hour going over the steps. Margaret had a list of trusted contacts in the consulting firm market, brokers who specialized in handling businesses like mine. She estimated it might take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to finalize, depending on how swiftly I wanted to proceed. I'll need full confidentiality, I told her. No one can know until everything is done. Of course, she replied. But Colleen, once this is set in motion, you can't undo it. Are you ready for what Oilia's reaction might be? My eyes drifted to the memory of that cheap plastic flower, still sitting untouched on my kitchen counter. I'm ready to see who she really is. That same afternoon, I started quietly pulling away. I called David's landscaping company and told him I was reviewing maintenance contracts for my commercial properties and considering other providers. We're tightening the budget, I explained. I need competitive offers. His voice shifted immediately. Tight, panicked. Mrs. Hartwell, we can renegotiate. We can drop our rates. This isn't about money, I said calmly. It's about reevaluating the needs of the business. Next, I reached out to the handful of clients who used Oilia's bookkeeping services through my referrals. I informed them, professionally and without drama, that I'd be phasing out referral partnerships and that they should find new providers within 60 days. That evening, Oilia called. I could hear the concern in her voice. Mom, Mrs. Patterson said you're not sending her any more clients. Did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart, I replied. I'm just streamlining how I operate. But Mom, that's my income. I'm sure you'll find something else soon, I said gently. You're resourceful. You'll figure it out. There was a long silence on the line. Mom, are you okay? You've been acting different. I'm fine, Oilia, just busy with work. When I hung up, I glanced at the plastic flower again, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Agency. Not the control that comes from rescuing others or solving their problems, but the kind that comes from drawing your own boundaries. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a rhythm. I met with buyers, reviewed contracts, examined financial records, and slowly began removing the ties between my company and Oilia's way of life. Margaret handled the legal intricacies, but I made sure I remained involved in every critical decision. Keeping it all secret was the most difficult part. I'd always been transparent with Oilia, even when it wasn't wise. But this felt like something I had to do alone. 3 weeks in, I received a call from David. Mrs. Hartwell, someone at the chamber told me you might be selling Hartwell Consulting. Is that true? My heart jumped for a second, but my voice stayed even. People talk. David, you know how gossip works. But if you were selling, you'd tell us, right? It would affect our work with you. If and when I make such decisions, I'll inform you when the time is appropriate. Later that night, Oilia appeared at my front door. Her hair was pulled back, her sweatshirt was one I remembered from her college days, and the worry on her face was obvious. Mom, we need to talk, she said, stepping right into the living room. First David's contracts, then my bookkeeping clients, and now this rumor about you selling the business. What's happening? I sat across from her, keeping my hands steady in my lap. I'm reevaluating what's important to me. What does that even mean? It means I'm 67 years old, and I'm tired of being the one carrying everything on my shoulders. Her cheeks flushed. Is this about Mother's Day? About the gift? I'm sorry, Mom. We've just been under a lot of financial pressure lately. I almost smiled. Financial pressure. While living in a house I paid for, driving cars I bought, and drawing income from jobs I created for them. But I didn't say a word about that. Instead, I met her gaze and said, This isn't about one day, Oilia. This is about understanding what really matters. She left 20 minutes later, frustrated and confused. I watched her drive away in the car I'd co-signed for back to the house where I paid the mortgage, but not for much longer. The phone rang the following Tuesday morning while I was going over the final details of the sale agreement. Margaret had secured a solid offer from a larger consulting group that was expanding in our region. It was better than I'd anticipated, both financially and structurally. Just as I was signing the preliminary paperwork in Margaret's office, my cell buzzed. I glanced at the screen. The call was coming from my home number. That alone sent a chill down my spine. I was sitting in Margaret's office. No one should be answering that phone. "Hello, Mrs. Hartwell. This is James Morrison with Morrison & Associates. I'm calling regarding the acquisition of Hartwell Consulting." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry. Who did you say you were?" "James Morrison. I'm handling due diligence for the buyer. I might have dialed the wrong number. I thought I was calling your office." "You called my home line." "Oh, apologies. Someone picked up and said they were your assistant. They authorized me to share deal details." I closed my eyes. Only one person had a key to my house. Only one person might answer my phone and presume to speak on my behalf. "Thank you for the call, Mr. Morrison. Going forward, please direct all communications through my attorney, Margaret Chen." I ended the call, heart racing, and immediately rang my house phone. 4 rings. Then she picked up. "Mom's house, this is Oilia." "What are you doing in my house?" Silence. "I thought you were out at some meeting." "I just stopped by to water the plants." "I don't have any plants that need watering." Another pause. Longer. "Okay, fine. I was looking for something. David said you might have some old tax records he needed, and the phone kept ringing, so I answered it." Her excuses fell apart as she spoke them. Her voice trembled under the weight of her lies. "I'm on my way. We're going to talk." The drive back from Margaret's office should have taken 15 minutes, but every second dragged. I kept hearing that man's voice, and how casually my daughter had pretended to be my employee. She'd invaded my home, accessed my private calls, and inserted herself into confidential negotiations. When I arrived, her car was still parked outside. Inside, I found her in my office, seated at my desk, shuffling through paperwork like she owned the place. She glanced up as I entered, caught between defensiveness and embarrassment. "Find what you were looking for?" I asked coolly. She gestured toward the documents spread out before her. "Mom, what is all this? You're actually selling the company?" I walked over and began collecting the documents, agreements, financial projections, confidentiality statements, none of which she had any right to see. "This is business. Mine, not yours." She stood up, voice rising. "Business? Mom, this isn't just your business. It affects all of us. David's work depends on your contracts. My income comes from your clients. You can't just do this without talking to us." I stopped and looked at her. Truly looked. A grown woman, 35 years old, sitting at my desk in my chair, talking as if she had a vote in decisions about my life's work. "When did I let it come to this?" I murmured, then louder, firmer. "Actually, Oilia, I can do exactly that. It's my company, and I don't need anyone's permission." "But what about the family? Don't we matter?" "What about the family?" I echoed. "Since when did you start caring about us as a family?" She flushed. "I've always cared. You're my mother." "Am I? Or just your funding source?" The silence between us was sharp and painful. I could hear a neighbor's dog barking outside, the mundane sounds of life continuing as mine cracked wide open. Then she spoke again, softly now, unsure. "Mom, if this is still about Mother's Day, I told you I was sorry. We can do something special next year." "Next year?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "Just like every other year where respect is promised, but never delivered." I sat down, finally feeling the weight of it all, and stared at my daughter, truly seeing her as she was. "Do you even realize how much money I've put into your life, into David's, all these years?" She shifted awkwardly. "We never asked you to keep track. $400,000, not including the mortgage I'm still paying on your house or the business contracts I've arranged for David or the referrals that provide your income." Oilia opened her mouth as if to argue, but no words came out. She clearly hadn't expected me to bring actual figures into the conversation. I'm not saying this to shame you, I said gently but firmly. I'm saying it because you need to hear the truth. I've been underwriting your adult life for over a decade, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being your mother and became your financial backup plan. That's not true, she said quickly, almost reflexively. Isn't it? Tell me, when was the last time you called just to check in, to ask how I was holding up after your father passed, to see how I'm doing, alone in this house that used to be full of life? Her face changed, the bravado crumbled, and for a moment I saw something raw in her eyes. Mom, when you gave Patricia a cruise and a ring worth $20,000 and handed me a plastic flower, it wasn't about the cost. It was about what it said. How much thought you put into hers, and how little you put into mine. Tears slid down her cheeks. But I couldn't stop now. I'd swallowed these words for years, and they were finally spilling out. You treat Patricia like family because she makes you work for her approval. But me? You expect me to keep giving my money, my time, my support, without question. I love you, Mom, she whispered. Do you? I asked, leaning forward. Or do you just love what I provide? She didn't respond. She couldn't. My phone rang, cutting through the thick silence. David's name lit up on the screen. Don't answer it, Oelia said, her voice suddenly sharp. I picked it up anyway. Hello? Mrs. Hartwell, David began, his tone urgent. Oelia told me about the sale. We need to talk. As a family. This impacts all of us. No, David. It doesn't. It impacts me. It's my business and I have the right to sell it. But the contracts, our future... Your future has been my burden for far too long. It's time you both stand on your own. I ended the call and looked at Oelia. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the woman in front of her. Mom, you're not really going to go through with this, are you? I've never been more certain about anything. That's when her panic began to show. The following morning, my phone started ringing before sunrise. 6:47 a.m. Oelia's name flashed across the screen. I ignored it. She called again, then again. By the time I'd finished my coffee, I'd already counted 12 missed calls. On the 13th, I finally picked up. Mom, please, can we talk? Really talk? We did that yesterday, Oelia, and I was very clear. You can't tear everything apart just because of a bad Mother's Day gift. I placed my coffee cup down with a calm I didn't feel. This isn't about a single gift, and deep down you know that. Then what is it? What do you want from me? I want to be seen. Not as a credit card with a heartbeat, but as a human being, as your mother. I do see you as my mother. Then when was the last time you treated me like one? Silence. Then she said, quieter, more frightened. If you sell the company, we'll lose it all. The house, David's work, my clients. We'll have to start from scratch. Yes, you will, and maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. She ended the call. 20 minutes passed before she rang again, then again, and again. After the 15th call, I stopped counting. Each voicemail followed the same pattern, pleading, bargaining, guilt-tripping, threatening. She cycled through every emotional tactic in her playbook. Mom, please, just call me back. We can figure this out. Mom, David is having chest pains from the stress. Do you really want him in the ER? Mom, I'm sorry about the flower. I'll do better. Just don't go through with the sale. Mom, people are going to think you're cruel, that you've turned cold. Is that really how you want to be remembered? By noon, the count had reached 28 calls. I knew because I had started marking them down, one by one. Each ring was proof that she finally saw it, the truth I had kept buried for so long, that everything in her life was built on the foundation of my sacrifices, and I was done being invisible. The doorbell rang at 2:30 p.m. I looked through the peephole and saw Oelia standing on my porch, her eyes red and swollen. David stood behind her, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "Mom, please," Oilia began immediately, her voice shaky but urgent. "Can we talk about this like rational adults?" "We tried that yesterday," I said flatly. "But instead of talking, you went through my personal files and pretended to be someone you're not." David stepped forward, his tone clipped and defensive. "With all due respect, Mrs. Hartwell, this isn't just about you. This affects more than just your life. We have a family." "And I'm part of that family too," I said softly. "Which is why I need to do what's best for all of us. And right now, that means teaching you both how to stand without leaning on me." Oilia's face tightened, her emotions spilling over. "Mom, I'm begging you. Please don't do this." "You're begging now," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. "When was the last time you called just to check in? When did you last invite me over for a normal dinner, not out of obligation? When did you say you loved me without needing something?" Her mouth opened, but no words came. The silence said everything. "I thought so," I continued. "The only time you reach out is when you need help. The only time you visit is when there's something to gain. The only time you care is when something's at risk." David's frustration finally boiled over. "This is absurd. You're punishing us for being independent, for building a life of our own." "Independent?" I let out a short laugh. "David, you're nearly 40 and you've never once paid a full mortgage on your own. Oilia earns every penny from positions I arranged. You think that's success?" "We think that's family," Oilia replied, voice cracking. "Families help each other." "Help is mutual," I said. "What have you done for me, Oilia? In all these years, what have you given, besides taking?" Her eyes darted to David, then back to me. She was searching for an answer that wouldn't come. "I gave you grandchildren," she said after a pause. "No, you didn't," I said. "You gave birth to them, then moved 3 states away. You visit twice a year. I haven't seen Tommy and Sarah in 8 months." She turned pale. Even David looked unsettled. "You want to know what real family looks like?" I continued. "Patricia's kids call her just to chat. They show up uninvited to help with groceries. They remember her birthday, no reminders needed. They buy her thoughtful gifts because they know her, because they care. That's why she got the ring. That's why she got the cruise." By now, tears were streaming down Oilia's cheeks. But I didn't stop. Years of buried pain were rushing out of me like a flood. I worked for 3 decades to build something, not just for me, but for you, to give you security, opportunity, comfort. And somehow you started treating it like an entitlement instead of a gift. You stopped seeing me. You only saw the benefits. "Mom, I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll be better. I'll change." "You're sorry because you're afraid," I said gently. "Not because you understand what's wrong." David put a hand on her arm. "Let's go," he muttered. "She's not listening." But Oilia pulled away. "No, wait." She looked at me, eyes full of desperation, but also something new. Vulnerability, real, unfiltered emotion. "Mom, what do you want from me? What can I do to make this right?" I looked at her, this woman I had raised, now finally asking the question I'd been waiting to hear for years. "I want you to figure out who you are without leaning on my money," I said. "I want you to learn what real relationships look like, the kind that aren't based on what someone can give you. I want you to understand that love is about connection, not transactions." She swallowed. "And if I do that? If I prove I've changed?" "Will you change your mind?" I shook my head slowly. "Oilia, I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing it to liberate myself. I'm 67. I want to see who I am when I'm no longer responsible for everyone else's decisions." I stepped back and began closing the door. "Mom, wait!" she called, voice trembling. "I love you. I really do love you." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "I love you too, Oilia. That's why I'm doing this." Then I closed the door and listened to her cry on my porch for the next 10 minutes before they finally drove away. The sale was set to close in just 2 weeks. 3 months later, I found myself sitting on the front steps of a small cottage overlooking the lake, the sunset casting soft gold and rose hues across the water. The place wasn't grand, certainly not compared to the home I'd left behind, but it felt more like mine than anything I'd owned in decades. No memories hiding in corners. No echoes of disappointment clinging to walls, just stillness and possibility. The transition had been smoother than I expected. 30 years of work, contracts, emails, and accolades, boxed, labeled, and stored. I only kept what held emotional weight, a handful of family photos, Harold's favorite novels, and the handmade quilt my mother stitched when Oilia was born. The cottage had been sold furnished, which was exactly what I needed. I wasn't interested in dragging baggage, emotional or physical, into this next chapter. The mismatched chairs and overgrown garden were a welcome contrast to the polished life I used to maintain. I'd never had time to tend to a garden before. Now, time was all I had. It had been 6 weeks since I last heard from Oilia. The silence ached some days, but there was clarity in it too. I realized how many years I'd spent tying my worth to her attention, her needs, her approval. Now, I was learning to tie it to something simpler. Peace. My own peace. The proceeds from the business sale gave me more than enough to live comfortably. I'd set aside a trust for my grandchildren's education, one they'd access independently when they turned 18. No control from their parents, no influence, just opportunity. Quietly, I also paid off the remainder of the mortgage on Oilia and David's house. It wasn't a gesture of kindness or reconciliation. It was a final closure, a severing of the last financial thread. Their home was now theirs, but they knew there would be no more checks, no more rescues. That chapter was over. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of thought. It was Susan, my neighbor across the lake. We'd grown close recently. Daily walks, shared dinners, conversations over wine that stretched into evening. "Colleen, are you free for dinner tomorrow?" her text read. "My son and daughter-in-law are visiting. I'd love for you to meet them." "I'd like that," I wrote back. And to my surprise, I meant it. Susan's connection with her children was everything I once wished for. Natural, honest, built on mutual care, not guilt or expectation. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of white wine and walked to the dock. The lake glowed under the fading light. A group of ducks glided by, their little ones forming a neat line behind them. Then another buzz. My heart leapt for a second, foolishly hoping it was Oilia. It wasn't. It was Margaret, my lawyer. "Thought you'd want to know. David's landscaping business filed for bankruptcy. Oilia's applying for a job at the elementary school. How are you holding up?" I stared at her message for a while before typing back, "I'm doing well. Thank you for letting me know." And I was. For the first time in a very long time, I was doing more than just surviving. I was living. I felt sorrow for them, but not guilt. They were adults. They'd made their choices, and now they'd have to navigate the consequences, just like the rest of us. A loon cried out across the lake, its haunting call echoing off the hills. I'd never heard that sound before moving here. There were so many things I'd never noticed, too busy tending to everyone else's needs. Tomorrow, I was starting a pottery class in town. Next week, a book club. Small things, maybe, but they were mine. Chosen because I wanted them, not because anyone expected it. What surprised me most about this new life was how weightless it felt. For decades, I carried burdens that weren't mine. Other people's crises, other people's responsibilities. I used to think that was love. It wasn't. That was enabling. That was fear of losing connection. Now, I knew better. Real love, I was learning, sometimes meant saying no. Sometimes it meant letting people struggle so they could grow. Sometimes it meant walking away so they could find their own strength. 6 months later, I got a letter, not a phone call or a text, but an actual handwritten letter. The return address was Oelia's, but the handwriting was different, more careful, more deliberate. "Dear Mom," it began. "I've been trying to write this for months, but I never knew how to begin. At first, I wanted to ask you to come back, to help fix everything, to undo the damage. But now I understand that going back wouldn't have helped either of us, because the way things were before wasn't truly healthy. David and I are separating." You've probably already heard about the bankruptcy, and yes, I've started working at the elementary school. This past year has been painful and humbling, but also the most honest one of my life. I had to learn how to stand without leaning on you. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I just want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for taking you for granted. I'm sorry for treating you more like a responsibility than a human being. I'm sorry for resenting you when all you ever did was try to help. I see things clearly now. You didn't sell the company to hurt me. You did it to save yourself, to save both of us. I just wish I'd understood it sooner. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not trying to repair everything in one letter. I just want you to know. I finally hear what you've been trying to say all these years. Family isn't about money or favors. It's about showing up, being present, caring, even when there's nothing to gain. I hope you found peace, Mom. I really do. You deserve it more than anyone I know. With love, Oelia. P.S. I kept the plastic flower. It sits on my kitchen window. Every time I look at it, I remember your face that day. I remember the moment I realized what I'd done. I'm sorry it took me so long to feel the weight of it. I sat on the porch for a long while after reading her words, watching the sun melt into the lake. It was quiet, but not lonely. Then I went inside and picked up a pen. "Dear Oelia," I began, "thank you for writing. Your letter means more to me than I can express." But I didn't send it that day, or the day after, or the week after, because some wounds, no matter how sincere the apology, need time to fully close before they can bear the pressure of reconnecting. Some relationships need to rest before they can be rebuilt honestly, not on guilt, not on dependency, but on mutual respect and truth. Maybe someday we'd find a way back to each other. But not yet. Right now, I was simply free. Free from guilt. Free from emotional debts. Free from trying to earn affection that should have been given without price. At 67 years old, for the first time in decades, I was living on my own terms, and it was enough. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.